We're ready.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is the Monday, April 25th, 2022 Plan Commission and Commission for Citizen Involvement meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Iris, would you please call the roll?
Buchanan,
Here.
Heap,
Here.
Leek,
Here.
Pepe,
Here.
Phillips,
Here.
Rigby,
Here.
Stewart,
Here.
Counselor Mans.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. So first on our agenda tonight is a council update. Counselor Mans is here. Counselor Mans, would you like to give us an update?
Certainly. Well, good evening, everyone. The large news of the week, of course, is the ruling, Judge Leininger's ruling on access to the lake, part 1, meaning that there is a part 2 coming. Part 1 simply involves whether or not the waters, what can you say? The waters are in fact navigable and therefore fulfill the public doctrine on which she was ruling. We were a bit surprised that part 2, which is the access to the lake via the parks, hadn't been done first, but that is coming in July. There are certain things yet to be determined from the city side, such as exactly what this means, what in fact we can do about it, if anything. Obviously, it's a legal ruling, and where things will stand going forward. I am not a lawyer, so I am not going to, I see Evan smiling. I'm not going to get into some of the deep details of this particular ruling, except to say that we were surprised that it was as broad as it was. We expected a much narrower ruling. And that's about all I'm going to say on that one. If anyone has any questions on that, I would strongly suggest that they please reach out to either Martha Bennett or City Attorney Jason Lewis. Evan, I doubt very much you want to be included in that. No, he's shaking his head. Absolutely not. So either of those two folks would be able to give you much more detail if in fact you'd like to know. That's probably the largest thing that we're looking at the moment. The rest of our council meetings have been fairly benign insofar as we've talked of annexation. We have had study sessions and so on and so forth. Nothing that I think really would be extraordinarily important for this particular body at this point in time. But, you know, give us a month or so, I'm sure we'll come up with something. In the order of time and not wanting to keep you from your agenda, I would love to hear what, if anything, you have any questions or comments I should be taking back to council.
Sure, thanks, Counselor Mans. Commissioners, any questions for Counselor Mans?
I do see Mr. Boone's hand raised.
Yeah,
To that, I would just note that, of course, that's only a circuit court ruling, and the last time this case, it went up to the Court of Appeals in the Oregon Supreme Court. So there's certainly nothing final at this point.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Boone. I appreciate it. Anyone else have any questions or anything you'd like me to take back to the council?
I see none. Thank you, Counselor Mans, for the update.
Thank you. This may be one of the easiest liaison groups that I've ever sat before. Being experts all amongst yourself, I rarely get a question to take back to council, especially those that I can't answer. So thank you all very much.
All right, next on our agenda is a public comment. This is regarding issues not on the agenda. Iris, was there anyone who wished to make a public comment this evening?
No.
All right, so we'll move on. Next is the Commission for Citizen Involvement. We did receive two updates. One was from last week. It was that the Palisades Neighborhood Association held their annual general meeting on Thursday, April 21st of 2022. There was a recording of the meeting there. Director Siegel gave an update on House Bill 2001. So it was a good meeting. I would encourage anybody in the Palisades neighborhood who's interested in reviewing that to reach out to the Palisades neighborhood committee, commission, or excuse me, neighborhood organization. And if you need a link, you can get a link to the meeting and watch it. So that was last week. And then coming up here shortly is going to be, one second, let me find the meeting notice. Yeah, so coming up on Thursday, May 12th from 6:30 to 8:15 p.m., there'll be the 2022 annual meeting via Zoom of the first edition Neighbors in Forest Hills Neighborhood Association. The agenda will include discussion on the newly remodeled adult community center, family activities at the library, and more, roles of board members, and then nominations and elections of the board and officers. So that again will be held on Thursday, May 12th from 6:30 to 8:15 p.m. If you need any more information, you can contact the current chair, Sharon Gustafson. It's Sharon.Gustafson, Gustafson @gmail.com for more information. So that's all the citizen involvement updates I had for today. I'd like to continue to move on to our agenda. One second. Next on the agenda is item number 7. Oh, excuse me. Next on the agenda is item number 6, which are minutes from March 28th, 2022. Commissioners, are there any comments, corrections that any of the commissioners would like to make to the minutes of March 28th, 2022? I hear none. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from March 28th, 2022?
I move to accept the minutes as is.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Any abstains? None. All right, so the minutes are approved. Next, we'd like to move on to item number 7 on the agenda. This is finding conclusions in order for the Community Development Code amendments related to middle housing, LU 22-0007. Public comments are not accepted. On April 11, 2022, the Commission made a tentative decision to recommend Council approval of the proposed amendments to comply with the middle housing requirements of House Bill 2001. The Commission directed staff to return with draft findings, conclusions, and order that includes additional language addressing neighborhood association recommended changes to the covered front porch standards in the R6 zone. The staff coordinator is Erik Olson, senior planner. Planner Olson or Attorney Boone, are there any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, I have a few just oral sort of clarifications and updates for you that I wanted to provide. I just note just on the R6 front porch standards, we did come back with some recommended language for within the findings for the commission to consider. You know, essentially, we were working with, the original comment from Carol Ockert of the of the first edition Forest Hills Neighborhood Association that, essentially our front porch standards did not, maintain the original intent, which was to prohibit large obstructions from being located sort of within the front porch, like a fireplace. So she used that as an example. And she had proposed language that would allow exceptions for railings of up to 3 feet in height. So, essentially we looked into that based on commission direction and drafted some language that is similar in that, we do want to directly address, the structural elements and prohibit them from being located within the front porch, and also to allow for railings as an exception. But we did look into the specific recommended height of 3 feet. And we did recommend, based on some of the research that we did, for, guardrails when they are required on a residential project, the building code actually has a minimum of 3 feet. So we wouldn't want to necessarily set a maximum at the exact same, standard as the minimum for the building code. So we want to provide a little bit of flexibility. And by that same token, in some cases where there's where there is a home-based business, some types of home-based businesses involve folks that come to visit that home-based business. So in some residential areas, in those specific circumstances, the building code could require a railing of up to 42 inches in height in that area. So in order to plan for that circumstance, we suggested just a little bit of flexibility to set the railing height at 44 inches, just to provide 2 inches of flexibility there, but to also directly reference the building code in the case that, for whatever reason, that minimum height is raised in the future. So that is where we landed there, is essentially a proposal for language that railing shall not exceed 44 inches in height or the minimum height required by the building code, whichever is greater.
Great. Thank you, Eric. We do have a couple of questions if we can just stop here. One is a point of order. Attorney Boone, there was a question whether there's any need to have the counselor recuse herself. Maybe you can comment on that. Can the counselor stay in the meeting with us?
She certainly can. This is a legislative matter, so we're not ex parte contact issues. In any event, it's been recorded. So
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Counselor Mans, is there any other questions that you had, or that was? Okay.
Good. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I thought I saw Commissioner Stewart had his hand up. Commissioner Stewart, is there a question?
I lowered it back down. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, please continue, Planner Olson.
Thank you, Chair Keep. And as I mentioned, that was some language that we directed, at the direction of the Planning Commission. So we wanted to mention that, we had developed the language that you see in the revised attachment 2, which is where the draft code amendments are within our sort of proposed package here. A couple other things that I would, if you have, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to do a check with the commission. Does the commission have any comments on the language that staff added for the R6 porch additions? No? Looking around, I don't see any. Okay, thank you, Senior Planner Olson. Yeah, proceed.
All right. Well, if you want to talk about railing heights, I'm ready to talk about that for some time if you have the appetite. So some additional notes. We did receive some testimony at the previous meeting at the hearing that the city should set a minimum footprint size for cottages in a cluster in order to ensure that there is sufficient space to meet the needs of ambulatory or folks with ambulatory limitations. So we ended up following up. There was a bit of uncertainty regarding whether the city could comply with the state's minimum requirements under Division 46 while still setting a minimum footprint size. And we were able to actually confirm that we are able to establish a minimum size. DLCD did say that that would be compliant with Division 46. So we wanted to correct that. Also, I wanted to note that there is an error in the findings. There's a sort of a drafting error in the findings. So essentially we had referenced the state minimum requirements in basically OAR 660-46-224B. And instead of subsection B, we meant to reference subsection E, or it was a typographical error that was intended to reference subsection E, which more directly references the matter at hand regarding the minimum floor area and maximum floor area for cottages within a cluster. So I just wanted to point out that typographical error and note that staff would recommend a change. I'm going to go ahead and sorry.
Yeah, Eric, we'll go ahead and, I mean, we're changing that. So if the commission adopts the findings, that correction will be made.
Yeah, I can just share my screen really quick to show the quick change, if you will. So it would be to page 8 of 11 on line 4, essentially changing subsection B to subsection E. Hopefully that's clear enough. So just a few more things on that. I would just say that we discussed last time that the commission did not recommend setting a minimum footprint. So regardless of that question of the unit size for a cottage cluster, there's a separate sort of question of should you establish a minimum footprint? And so based on the commission's direction to not sort of make any changes in response to that testimony, we acted accordingly. And so just one other clarification I would make is that, we had discussed previously that while, the city does have the ability to set the maximum number of cottages within a cottage cluster, that there was no, or that we had actually received word from DLCD that there was no way for the city to establish a maximum number of cottage clusters so that they could construct additional clusters on a property as long as there was no more than 8 cottages per cluster. We actually did receive confirmation from DLCD that it was something that we could do. We could actually say just there's a minimum sort of number, a maximum rather number of cottage clusters per lot. So we could actually say not only is there a maximum of 8 cottages per cluster, but there's a maximum of 1 cottage cluster per lot. So just to clarify that, that was a bit different than some of the small nuances that we discussed prior. So I just wanted to give an update regarding that.
Great, thanks. Maybe we can take some questions if commissioners have any. Commissioners, any questions on the updates that Senior Planner Olson just gave? No. Senior Planner Olson, I'll just comment that, yeah, I think thanks for making that typo correction to reference the Division 46 code. Makes a lot of sense. And then I'll also say that I thought staff did a great job at capturing kind of the feedback from the commission in kind of deciding, what we wanted to do as far as looking at, minimum footprint size. So I thought in the findings that was captured very well. My recommendation here would again to continue on with the findings, not make any changes. I thought the comments that we received were somewhat ostensible type of comments, and that we went with what the written record said. It talked about the mobility concerns that existed, and for the commission to take it a step further and looking at some other type of requirements, it's unclear what those are. So again, I think the findings were captured very accurately. Commissioners, do you have any other concerns or comments with that? Because that was a kind of request that the neighborhoods brought in, and we did want to follow up on it. No, so I think the commission is good with the findings with respect to
it looks
the
like
minimum footprint site. Sorry,
Commissioner Leek has her hand up.
sorry, I didn't. Oh yeah, Commissioner Leek, go ahead.
Eric, could you go over one more time the maximum cottage clusters? Is it per lot? So if you have 2 lots, you'd have to make them come together to accommodate, if you needed to have the amount of space to accommodate 8 cottage clusters. two contiguous lots would have to be made into one. Would that be accurate?
No, not necessarily. It's more that, let's say you had a large lot where you could theoretically fit more than 8 cottages. So the question would be, can you build more cottage clusters on that lot? So, we had originally been under the understanding from DLCD, which they've given us some conflicting direction there actually, but we were originally under the understanding that we could set the maximum number of cottages in a cottage cluster, but not necessarily the number of cottage clusters per lot. And that's, not talking about SB 458 land divisions or anything. So we did receive confirmation from DLCD that we could actually set the maximum number of cottage clusters per lot at 1, but we wouldn't have to allow more than 1 cottage cluster per lot. So theoretically, it's more if you had a really big lot and you wanted to build more than 1 cottage cluster, you'd have to, divide it into 2, I guess is more the, to refer to your comment.
But a cottage cluster can be up to 8 cottages is what you're saying?
Yeah, between 5 and 8 cottages.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Senior Planner Olson, I remember when I was reading that, it seemed to be nuanced with the courtyard. Is there any things that should be called out to the commission in terms of lot versus courtyard?
No, there's obviously there's a difference in the way that cottage clusters are regulated. So they are required to have courtyards. There's a lot more spatial sort of requirements for a cottage cluster that would not be required for other types of housing. So there's parking in addition to the sort of parking screening. There's courtyard requirements that be a certain dimension and have a certain amount of impervious surface area, or pervious surface area rather. So I think it's I think when it comes to that particular constraint, that could result in cottage clusters requiring just more area, obviously than let's say a townhouse project. If it were to be able to have 8 units, I'm sure it would be smaller than a more spread out project. So there's no lot size limitation to that's related to the courtyard regulations, if that's what your question was.
Vice Chair Pepe, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. Senior Planner Olson, just to confirm though, if the lot size is large enough to handle cottage clusters, or basically 2 cottage clusters, we would only allow 1, but then there could be additional middle housing that was built on that lot, correct?
No, there would not be additional middle housing that could be built on that lot without a subdivision of some type or partition, I suppose. But when it comes to the number of cottage clusters per lot, the language that we have right now is actually silent on the number of quote unquote clusters per lot. So we don't necessarily have that connection between maximum number of cottages and maximum number of cottage clusters per lot. And we just have the maximum number of cottages. So it might be, if there was a desire to limit it to just 1 quote unquote cluster per lot, we could include language that more directly gets there.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other comments or questions? I don't see any. So is there anything else that you would like to cover, Senior Planner Olson?
I think that should cover the items that we received clarification from DLCD on, and the additional sort of language that we've proposed for you. Thanks, Jamie.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, is there anything that we'd like to kind of walk through as far as the findings go, either through the staff memo or the actual findings? Yeah, Commissioner Leek.
I guess after what Senior Planner Olson just said, I would like to limit the number of cottage clusters per lot to 1 cottage cluster. Give it a finite if you have a lot, it can be between 5 and 8 cottages, not multiple cottage clusters. Even if you have an acre, it can only be 5 to 8 cottages. In other words, 1 cluster per legal lot.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Leek. Let me give an opportunity to Commissioner Bigby, then Commissioner Stewart to ask their question. We'll come back.
I'd just
Commissioner
like to express my support for the proposal for 1 cluster per lot.
Commissioner Stewart.
Yes, I would agree with Commissioner Leek. I can't conceive a situation where you would want more than 1 on a lot. Doesn't really make sense.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Stewart. So there's a recommendation. Is there a motion to update the findings to basically limit the cluster to 1 cluster per lot? Commissioner Lee?
I make a motion that we limit cottage clusters to 1 cluster per legal lot.
Second.
There's a second discussion on the motion. I guess the question would be to Senior Planner Olson and staff, to any concerns or feedback the staff has to the limitation of 1 cluster per lot.
Well, I don't know that we have any concerns, but we would just ask the commission to articulate a rationale, and hopefully a reason that's related to policy objectives on some level. What is the public interest in limiting that? I'm not advocating for one side or the other. I'm just saying that.
Sure, capture the
develop findings for that. Yeah.
Yeah, capture the kind of rationale. Yeah, Commissioner Lee.
I guess my rationale would be that it would preclude overly dense development in a neighborhood that does not have that kind of density, and being sensitive to the neighbors around it.
Okay, Commissioner Stewart.
Yeah, I would add that having more than 1 sort of self-contained cluster on a lot would undermine kind of a sense of community that I think is the purpose of that sort of development.
I have a question.
Yeah, Commissioner Phillips.
I got a question. I'm not sure I understand what a legal lot is. What's the maximum legal lot?
Staff.
So a lot, or a lot that has legal standing or ability to develop on it, is it a lot that was lawfully created at the time that it was created. It met the code, or it met whatever standards were in existence. And it's a lot that is recorded. It's a lot that can be transferred, that it can be sold. That's different than what we sometimes refer to as a tax lot that the county can create for different assessment reasons. It's a discrete real property that's deeded and can be sold, bought and sold, and was lawfully created. I may be hacking that, but Evan will tell me if I've messed up.
Thank you, Director Siegel. Commissioner Phillips, another question.
Okay, listen, I'm not opposed to the concept of limiting this to some definition, but, I mean, a lot to me, where I grew up was 100 foot across and 150 feet deep type of thing. So I understand these lots may be a bit larger, but I mean, are we talking there's some lots in this area that could be 6 acres?
Eric,
I'm just using that as an example, okay?
It might be helpful, Eric, if you can give an illustration, because I know this is something that the staff tested, and we looked at a typical 10,000 square foot lot and estimated how many cottages might fit on that lot and what size units they would be. There's also a minimum lot size that's required for cottage clusters. So I'll let Eric.
Yeah, so I guess just to speak to the constraints of cottage cluster development, we do allow them. So first of all, they, they're a minimum of 5. So we have to have at least 5 cottages to be a cottage cluster. We allow them on lots that are 7,000 square feet in size. At sort of that's the smallest lot we would allow them on in the city per the requirements from the state. But they don't really work on those lots. I think even, a 10,000 square foot lot, you might have trouble. Something more like a 12,000 square foot lot, you start getting there a little bit easier. But, for the most part, it does take up a lot of space to build these. We do have lots in the city that are quite large, that are, if it was, for instance, just an acre, you could fit potentially, several clusters on that lot prior to dividing it. So if you look at, 12,000 square feet, roughly is, it doesn't really have much room to move, wiggle room, I guess, if you will, but you could use that as a rough sort of parameter of how much a 5-unit cluster, or I'm sorry, cluster could sort of take up, how much space. Obviously, if you increase it to 8, it takes up a lot more space. Even 15,000 might not be enough. But still, you could theoretically on some lots in the city that are quite large, fit at least 2. I could imagine in some circumstances without coming in to do an additional partition or something. But again, this is just very loose. I'm not looking at like a thorough analysis of all the lots that are vacant in the city and providing some type of mean there. But there are lots out there that are quite large.
Commissioner Phillips, I'll let you ask one more question, and I'd like to take a question from Commissioner Stewart next.
Yeah. Mine's not a question. You've defined the parameters, Commissioner Olson, I'm sorry, or Planner Olson. You defined the parameters, so I'm in agreement with limiting it to 1 because I just there's no unlimited acreage out there anywhere in Lake Oswego that you'd have a small area with clusters and then massive amounts of land area. So I appreciate you indulging my ignorance with the size of the lots in Lake Oswego. Thank you.
Commissioner Stewart.
I think the other scenario, as I understand it, is someone could come in and take 2 or more contiguous lots and consolidate them into 1 lot in order to build a cottage cluster development. And I think that's kind of where Commissioner Leake's comment comes in, where there has to be a limitation as to how many of these units are on a lot so that something doesn't turn into a rather large group of houses that start to look like almost like a subdivision under the guise of a cottage cluster. So that's the other scenario that I think is possible to make this sort of development more realistic.
Thank you, Commissioner Bigsby.
Just building off of what Commissioner Stewart said, I think in terms of rationale, the state has called what we're talking about here middle housing, and we've been directed to interpret and implement their directives in a way which maintains neighborhood character. And it does seem that with when we start getting into multiple clusters, we could be looking at something that has gone from something that can fit into a neighborhood into something that looks more like an apartment complex or a sort of subdivision. So I think limiting it to 1 would better maintain the concept of middle housing.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? I'd like to call a vote on the motion then. So the motion is to recommend that staff add to the findings, limiting the number of clusters to 1 cluster per lot. Iris, would you call the roll?
Buchanan,
Sorry, Commissioner Buchanan, can you just state yes or no? Or Abstain.
Yes. Thank you. Heap,
Yes.
Leek,
yes,
Pepe,
Yes.
Phillips,
Yes.
Rigby,
Yes.
Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, motion's approved. Commissioners, any other comments on the findings, conclusions, order? Does anybody wish to go through it, or would there be a motion to approve the findings, conclusions, and order? Director Siegel?
I would advise that if you were to tentatively, basically what you'd be doing, I think, is modifying your tentative recommendation to include this new provision of limiting the number of cottage clusters on a lot. So if you were to make revise your tentative recommendation and replace it with the one that you're considering, and direct staff to return with revised findings for adoption on May 9th, that would, I think, get you where you want to go.
Okay, thank you, Director Siegel. So let me amend the motion then. Is there a motion to recommend to staff to have tentative findings, inclusions, and order updated based on the recommendation of limiting a lot to one cluster, and then prepare those findings, conclusions, and order, and come back to the Planning Commission on the next meeting, presumably May 9th.
I so move.
I second,
Iris, would you call the roll again?
Buchanan,
Yes.
Heap,
Yes.
Leek,
yes,
Pepe,
Yes.
Phillips,
Yes.
Rigby,
Yes.
Stewart.
Yes.
So I think that then concludes item number 7 on our agenda. We look to staff to tentatively prepare a recommendation for preparing findings, conclusions, and order, and come back to us on May 9th with the findings, conclusions, and order for final recommendation. Any other further comments from staff or questions from staff to the commission? No? All right. Then I'd like to move on to other business, item number 8 on our agenda. Director Siegel, is there any other business that you wish to discuss?
Not at this time, thank you.
We'll move on then to item number 9, schedule review. Director Siegel, is there a schedule update you'd like to give us?
Yes, thank you, Chair Heap. Commissioners, your next regularly scheduled meeting is May 9th, and that will be to consider findings again for House Bill 2001 amendments. Then following that, on May 23rd, we've arranged for a tour of demolition or non-conforming development properties that have had remodels or demolitions involved. And that's on the 23rd again with a 2 p.m. start time. So we're arranging for transportation. We'll plan on meeting at City Hall. And of course, we'll be putting an agenda packet out with some information on the properties that you'll be looking at beforehand. Then we have some other updates or adjustments to the schedule. Originally, there was a work session planned for the West Lake Grove Design District, Lake Grove Village Center Design Standards Update, the second of 2 work sessions so far. And checking in with the Lake Grove Business Association, they're not going to be ready to do that on, I guess it would have been, well, it would have been coming up, I think, on the 9th, actually, the next meeting. So we're proposing to move that over to your first meeting in June, which would be, I believe, Monday the 6th. And then originally, we had planned a work session on Monday the 6th to cover the state's climate-friendly equitable community rules, which are going through the adoption process right now with the Land Conservation and Development Commission. Rather than holding that work session on the 6th, after conferring with Chair Heap, we've decided, or he's decided, to hold that work session on the 27th of June so that it will follow a city council study session on the same topic on June 21st. So you'll have the benefit of council at least having been briefed on that set of state rules and perhaps having some feedback for us from that study session. And then the commission will discuss that on the 27th. It's fairly complex. There's a lot to go through. It's still somewhat in flux. Local jurisdictions across the state have had a lot to say about it, including like Oswego through the League of Oregon Cities. We've been participating. So there will be a lot to consider there. And we don't have anything else scheduled that evening, so should give us time to get through it. And that's it, Chair. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Siegel. Iris, did you have a comment or a question?
I do. Actually, our meeting is on June 13th, not the
Okay.
6th. And then
Oh,
also, are we going to be holding the meeting on May 9th remotely like we are tonight, since it's the only item on the agenda?
I think let's defer that decision. Let me work with Director Siegel and see what makes sense, and we'll announce it, based on the discussion. Unless Director Siegel, you'd like to just decide it now.
Well, I mean, it's really your, commission's choice. I think we just have some logistical issues that we need to make sure we're right. Iris, we need to Clackamas County Community Television wouldn't be covering that meeting in any event, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's not a factor. Are there any other scheduling needs that we have on the administrative side?
No, I'm not even, no, there aren't.
Okay, so really, it's
You
up
do Zoom.
it's up to you.
Commissioners, Zoom meeting, any comments or concerns? Oh, yeah, I think that,
Let's do it.
yeah, Director Siegel, I think the view of the commission here is just to hold another Zoom meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. One question, Director Siegel, just to make sure we understand how this all lines up with the council. So is it correct that there's still a hearing on the middle housing code for council, and that would be, I thought it was May 15th, but I may be incorrect.
Oh, that's a good question. So the city council hearing is scheduled for May 17th.
Okay,
And the findings, provided the commission adopts findings on May 9th, your findings
okay.
will be incorporated into the council report for May 17th.
yeah, so I think that's good to know. Again, I think everybody in the city here is working towards an objective to get the work completed and make sure that, we don't get into a situation where we default into the, model code. I think we're very close. Hopefully this is just the final straw that we put on it, the final toothpick.
Well, excellent work, and thank you for the effort.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really important, and you're doing
Thank you, guys.
great job. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you to all the commissioners for doing such an excellent job, and to staff for working very hard to prepare our findings, and to council for supporting the Plan Commission. Thank you. So next on our agenda is adjournment. So make a motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
None. Any abstains? None. All right, meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you,
Good
staff.
night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.